Hey guys, it's Dr. Justin Marchegiani here. We have a live Q&A session here going for the Thyroid Reset Summit. So any questions in and regards to thyroid hormone health, any questions that were topics that were reviewed during the Thyroid Reset Summit are all free game. And if you haven't seen the summit yet, head over to thyroidresetsummit.com and make sure you subscribe. Make sure you get access to that great summit. So we're going to be diving in and going over some really cool topics here today. So feel free and chime in the chat below. We should be able to get your questions all queued up. All right. So while questions are coming in, feel free and let me know. So thyroid, really important topic. Talk about it all the time. Let me just make sure we're good here. Excellent. All right, we're looking good here. Stream is great. All right, so in regards to thyroid health is so important because I would say 80% of the patients that have their thyroid treated conventionally still have a lot of thyroid symptoms going on. Cold hands, cold feet, hair loss, fatigue, weight gain, mood issues, anxiety, depression. So we really want to make sure we're getting to the root cause. A lot of people, they get their TSH suppressed, meaning hypothyroid is diagnosed with an inverse hormone, meaning we have this hormone called TSH, which is a brain hormone, not a thyroid hormone. This is important to distinguish. And this brain hormone essentially signals or talks to the thyroid to make thyroid hormone. So we have a high level of TSH that's raising the volume from our pituitary so we can yell to the thyroid and have the thyroid make thyroid hormone. So the whole idea is high TSH, we're stimulating, we're whipping that tired horse of a thyroid to make more thyroid hormone. So the whole goal is TSH about 4.5 or 5.5. We want to drop that down to closer to 1. And once that's done, hey, our hands are washed, we're good, no issues. We don't really have to worry about anything else. That's the conventional mindset towards thyroid issues. We want to look downstream to T4, which is your more inactive thyroid hormone. T4 is free in total. We want to see how it converts downstream to T3, which is our more active hormone. I see a lot of people that have good TSH, and if you get a good MD, maybe they even run T4. If you're lucky, you get 2 hormones to look at or 2 markers to look at. But then T4 to T3 definitely tends to drop, or we see a high amount of reverse T3, which is our metabolically inactive kind of metabolic blanks in our metabolic gun. It takes up space from that real active T3. And then, of course, we'll have thyroid antibodies, which are part of the autoimmune Hashimoto's attack, which is going to be a big stressor on the thyroid. Tends to block hormones from working in the receptor sites. It creates inflammation. It tends to drain your thyroid follicles of actual hormone because it's attacking it and causing it to bleed out. So we have a lot of other underlying mechanisms we got to look at here. So let's dive in. First question just came in here. Joseph Smith writes in, 23-year-old suffering from IBS, indigestion, gallbladder issues, ultrasound is clear, but I suffer from chronic constipation, continuously using ACV, ginger, gluten-free. How is this related to thyroid? So number one, we need to make sure that we can digest and break down our proteins and ionize all of our minerals and break down our fat-soluble vitamins. So if we can't break down selenium, zinc, magnesium, our vitamin A, our fat-soluble nutrients, CoQ10. If we can't break these compounds down, we're not going to be able to get them in. So imagine a deficit of lumber or piping or wiring for a builder building a new house. You're just not going to be able to build a great house. And or if we have infections in our gut that's stimulating an autoimmune attack, or we have bad foods coming in stimulating the autoimmune attack, then we're making it worse each and every day. Does that make sense? So we got to look at it both ends. So anytime we have a digestive deficit, that creates a bottleneck on the other side of the equation where these nutrients get digested, absorbed, and assimilated. Source Feezy writes in, Justin, my mom had a hysterectomy many years ago and has been severely depressed ever since. She does take meds, which really help her out. What do you suggest to get to the root cause? So I did a whole podcast on mood just an hour ago. So make sure you go take a look at that podcast to get more intel on what's happening, number one. Number two, if she had a hysterectomy many years ago, she probably had estrogen dominance, some significant hormonal imbalances. And once you have that removed, if it's a total hysterectomy, ovaries and uterus, well, now you got to really make sure your adrenals are working, because your adrenals are that backup generator. Once you go into menopause, that need to be there so it can help fill in the gaps of where our ovaries worse. We got to look at the adrenals. That's super important in getting to the root cause when we see hormonal issues. Now, how this connects to thyroid, because everything in this talk has to connect to thyroid. It's got to. We need healthy levels of female hormones to activate our thyroid. Healthy levels of progesterone stimulate the enzyme that actually makes thyroid hormone. So that's really important. Garden Zen wrote in, I was recently diagnosed hyperthyroid, negative for Hashimoto's and Graves. They think viral from flu. The side effects are awful. I take iodine for stage 0 breast cancer. What can I do? So you were diagnosed with hyperthyroid. So in general, high levels of T3, high levels of T4. Is that what came back? Number one, first question. Number two, there were no Graves antibodies, so no thyroid stimulating immunoglobulin, TSI. Any TSH receptor site antibodies? None of those. I want to know how high your levels are. It depends on how much iodine you're taking. I would probably drop down the iodine you're doing just to make sure that's not a driving factor. I would need to get a lot more questions in to understand how it came about. But if you think you're doing too much iodine or doing too much, I would just more topically hit the breast tissue versus taking it orally. I drop that dose down to definitely under 1 milligram and then just topically rub on the area so then you can absorb some of that iodine through the skin, just to be on the safe side. Of course, I get concerned with the overstimulating the thyroid from too much iodine and or stimulating an autoimmune attack. So I want to get more intel, and you may even want to go get an ultrasound to see if there's any inflammation affecting the thyroid that could be coming back false negative on the blood work. So I'd want to make sure you're testing TPO antibodies. I want to make sure you're also testing thyroid globulin antibody too. Does that make sense? Hope it does. All right, more questions. Feel free and chime in, y'all. So what else? One of the big things with thyroid hormone or thyroid health in conventional medicine is the underlying mechanism regarding thyroid antibodies or autoimmune attack tends to get ignored. And this is important. This is partly because of the fact that conventional medicine looks at thyroid autoimmunity as, well, it's not worth treating because the medication and the prednisone and the immunosuppressive medications, the disease is not serious enough. Let's save it for Crohn's. Let's save it for serious ulcerative colitis. Let's save it for more symptomatic, more immunoimbalanced, more immune compromised conditions that would benefit from it, right? So the side effects can't be worse than what the person's actually presenting with. And that's kind of where you're at with thyroid. So it tends to get totally ignored. No immunosuppressants, no corticosteroids get thrown at it, which is probably a good thing, but you kind of are left in the dark. You're kind of ignored. You aren't really getting a full spectrum of testing done because that isn't worth going there to a lot of these conventional docs. So then you're kind of left in the wind, like, what do you do? And that's where we got to look deeper at the underlying thyroid issues from an autoimmune perspective, because these are ignored and we have to get to the root cause. Dennis writes in, how do I gain weight while taking Dexedrine? So let me first refresh myself what Dexedrine is real fast. I think it's a stimulant, right? Yeah. So basically it's like an Adderall. So how do I gain weight while taking it? So first off, I would say, why are you taking it? It's pharmaceutical, speed. Why are you taking it? Number one, I just want to get to the root cause of why you're actually needing it and see if you can get off it. Because you're taking speed and you're like, hey, well, why am I not gaining weight? Well, first off, get to the root cause of why you need the pharmaceutical speed anyway and work on it from there. But could it affect thyroid? Yeah, I mean, it's whipping a tired horse for sure. After doing all tests and taking all medications, avoid antacid, but malabsorption and constipation hasn't reduced. It's been a month. Can sedentary lifestyle trigger malabsorption? Help me, doc. So there could be other infections going on. So if the food's under control, there could be other infections going on that need to be looked at. So that's where we'd have to dive in with a good functional medicine doc, either myself or someone else, to look at what the other underlying issues are outside of food, outside of just taking HCl and enzymes. And if you guys are enjoying this, I sent an email out the other day for people that connected with me on the Thyroid Reset Summit. If you're enjoying this stuff, click the subscribe button, smash the like as well, and hit that bell so you get notifications of when I am live. Beth writes in, I was diagnosed with hyperthyroidism and my antibodies are higher. I'm feeling pain in my shoulders and back, and I have months of missing periods. Right now I take methimazole. That's like a iodine inhibiting medication that suppresses thyroid function. I have a lot of headaches. So first off, you were diagnosed with hyperthyroidism. So you have antibodies, TSH receptor site antibodies and TSI. So I'd want to see where those antibodies are at. And I'd want to make sure that we are on top of all the triggers, the gluten, the leaky gut, the infections. I'd want to get on all of that, get that dialed in. And then, of course, if you're missing periods and you're essentially amenorrhea, you have to get tested for your adrenals and get tested for your female hormones. There's probably issues there, and you have to get to the root cause of why that is. Hope that makes sense. Joseph Smith writes in, thanks, doctor, for all your videos and all your efforts. Kudos. Thank you, Joseph. Appreciate it. Low Heat writes in, how dangerous is hybrid broccoli? Not sure. We're keeping all the conversation here. We're going to keep the topics on thyroid function. Topic is thyroid function. Good. So all questions are on that. Christian writes in, I was addicted to opiates for a decade, been clear for a year. Now changed my diet, rid of candida, but still feel fatigued and foggy. I rely on kratom to get me through the day. Can my thyroid help? It depends. If your thyroid hasn't been tested yet, it needs to be looked at because low thyroid function can create pain in the body. A lot of people that have fibromyalgia tend to also have lower thyroid function. Now, the question is, the thyroid tends to get caught up in the mess. So it may not be the root cause. It may be part of an autoimmune issue. So it's important to look at it because if your hormone's very low, you definitely need that supported and addressed because that can be part of what's going on. Okay. So very important. We want to be looking at the root cause. We want to be getting to the root cause of why we're here in the first place. Especially if you have a lot of brain fog, there's going to be a lot of gut issues, right? And if there's gut issues and gut inflammation, that tends to create inflammation in the brain. And inflammation in the brain will manifest with brain fog and with cognitive issues. So when you have brain fog, the first thing I want you to focus on are like, what did I, the foods I just ate, what just drove inflammation in the gut? If it's acute, it's probably food. If it's chronic, there's probably an underlying gut issue. PTBO Towers writes in, I was diagnosed with hypothyroid function 29 years ago. 3 years ago, I started having diarrhea, very loose stool bowel movements. My TSH are very different from one test to another. No specialist in my city. So number one, TSH has a diurnal rhythm. So you should choose a time to do your lab testing where you're looking at TSH every day. So maybe between 9 and 10 a.m., make sure it's tested. That way you're looking at it within that same diurnal pattern, number one. Number two, if you're taking thyroid hormone, I like to see where your levels are at in my patients 2 to 3 hours after they take their thyroid hormone, if there's T3 in it. I want to see where their levels are kind of maxed out. My concern is if we do it fasting, a lot of that hormone may be metabolized and we may not get a good window where they're sitting at optimal levels. So it's important that we look at that. But you got to do the TSH testing, a part of the full thyroid testing at, relatively in that same hour of waking. Okay, doc, by the way, how much flaxseed can be eaten a day so as not to cause any issues with hormone, with testosterone, PSA, and typhoid hormone? Or probably you mean thyroid hormone. It depends. Flaxseed a lot of times is used to metabolize estrogen. So typically a tablespoon. It's mostly used in that first half of the cycle when estrogen is the most dominant. Garden Zen writes in, I'm following Dr. Brownstein concerning iodine intake. I'm taking half the dose now, 12.5. I think you mean milligrams daily. Could that contribute to hyperthyroid? Yes, it could. Yes, it could. Yes, it could. Your question earlier regarding thyroid hyperfunction happening, I think it happened due to the high iodine. I have a big problem with people doing mega doses of thyroid or iodine like that because it can contribute to hyperthyroid. Sometimes it can stimulate thyroid antibodies. I would bring that level down tenfold minimum and see how we do. I'd even come off it for a few days, see if that stabilizes you and bring it back in at that, half a milligram, or even I would just come in at 150 to 250 micrograms a day. And then I would just taper it up every week to maybe you hit a max of 1.5 milligrams, but start slow. Naomi writes in, I just recently diagnosed with Hashimoto's. My antibodies are on a TPO of 36.94. That's not bad. Or ATPO. I never heard of ATPO. And then TPO 56.19, vitamin D at 41.48. I'm 46, taking vitamin D3. Just started Synthroid, 25 milligrams for a month. Feel yuck. So number one, autoimmune antibodies are a little bit high. We want TPO, we'll need 20. Number two, you're on a very low dose of thyroid hormone. So, I mean, I would just want to know, did you start feeling worse when you were put on Synthroid? Did it just, you feel the same? Did you feel better? How did you actually feel? And I don't have any of your other lab hormones. I don't have TSH. I don't have T4. I don't have T3. So I need a lot more info before I give you any feedback on that. Stuxnet right in, Doc. I just arrived. I don't know if you've talked about it, but what to do when TSH and T3 is normal, but T4 is low. Antibodies are practical. Sometimes that happens, and it's kind of a weird phenomenon. It's almost like there's an over conversion happening, and that T4 is almost being overly converted to T3, but T3 levels are mid-range or higher. Honestly, it just depends on the presentation, meaning if someone's TSH was high or T3 was low, and then they had symptoms and their symptoms are getting better as their TSH drops and their T3 goes up, I wouldn't worry about it so much. But of course, I'm working on fixing the adrenals, fixing the gut, supporting nutrition as well. So we're doing a lot of other things outside of just focusing on the thyroid. So sometimes that can just fix itself as all the other systems are being supported. But it depends on the presentation, and it depends on if it's gotten better or worse over time and how the symptoms correlate with that marker dropping. Naomi writes in, I feel the same, no better. T3 total is 1.01. I think you mean, well, in the US, that would typically be 101, more than likely. So if you're, I'd want to also know T3 free. So again, I'd want to know TSH, T4 free, T3 free. And again, if you have thyroid issues and you're being mildly supported and you're not feeling better, you got to look at the female hormones and the adrenals too. They're intimately connected. And we got to also dive into the gut. Remember, people that have thyroid symptoms, the thyroid does not spontaneously dysfunction in and of itself. There are other inputs on the thyroid, not just the thyroid by itself. Low Heat writes in, which iodine supplementation or brand do you prefer? Also, if taking iodine supplement, one can go for Himalayan salt instead of iodized salt, right? You know, any brands that doesn't have any anti-caking agents? Yes. So number one, I like Redmond's Real Salt for good quality salt. That's good. Number one. I mean, in my line, I have a product called Iodine Synergy. It's good, clean potassium iodide that gets converted to iodine right in the body. Iodide is just two molecules of iodine together, and then the body just splits it. It's no big deal. So I would do that first, and you got to start at a lower dose and taper off. But it just depends. If there's antibodies or any other stuff, I always hold off on iodine originally. Sylvia writes in, Dr. Justin, how is hyperthyroid diagnosed as far as X-ray revealing nodules? Yeah, you may see an X-ray or palpation. There may be nodules. You may see high levels of T3 and T4. You may see very, very low levels of TSH, ideally without thyroid meds, because sometimes meds or endogenous hormones can give you a false positive of low TSH not being a hyperthyroid issue. And then so high levels of T3, T4, you can see TSI markers, which is thyroid stimulating immunoglobulin, as well as TSH receptor site antibody. So all of the above could be potential. Garden Center writes in, thank you for your help trying to figure this out. I also have a small goiter. Yeah, so I mean, goiter could be from low iodine. It also could be an autoimmune component. It could be from high TSH. So make sure you're working with a good functional medicine doctor so you're fretting it out. Naomi writes in, T4 total 9.25, free T4 0.98, TSH 0.81, free thyroxine 8.48. So yeah, I mean, you got to look at the adrenals. The adrenals are being ignored. There's a little bit of antibodies, but the adrenals and the gut are being ignored. So you're in Mexico, low white blood cell count could be an infection. I'd look deeper at the adrenals and the gut. Low Heat, you're welcome. Kelly Nelson writes in, hypothyroid 20 years, no Hashimoto's. NDT is not effective without additional T3. So natural desiccated thyroid. What would be the reason for this? So it depends. How do your labs look? Is it just low levels of T3? How low is your T3? When you supplement, does your T3 go back to at least middle of the reference range or top 25% of the reference range? How do you feel when that happens? Do you feel better, worse, or the same? And then depending on that, we got to look at other systems because there's a big overlap with adrenal symptoms and thyroid symptoms. Got to look deeper at that. How often should your thyroid test be done? I have a good test about a year ago. Should it be checked every year? More often as we age? I mean, yearly just to be safe, but if you have thyroid issues, you'd probably want to look at, it depends if you're stable. probably twice a year if you're on thyroid medications. If you're not quite stable, at least quarterly, or if you're trying to get the dosage down, monthly, you ensure that you're dialed in fast. Naomi, you're welcome. Sherry writes in, my free T3 is 2.3. What do I need to increase it? Free T4 1.04. Yeah, so your free T3 is in the bottom 10% of the reference range. So that is very, very low. So not sure what your TSH is, but you may need some supplemental thyroid hormone. But you'd also have to look deeper into your adrenals as well and look at your gut. But that is concerning levels of T3. I would need to understand your symptom presentation, but you should be working with a good functional medicine doc that is helping to look at all the other areas. It's really important, everyone. You know, we're talking about thyroid. You may think, hey, this is my number. Should I just do this? Maybe, but you should probably be looking at everything else so you know that you're getting to the root cause, not just treating the symptom. Okay, I want to make sure we keep that in mind. Awesome, y'all. Any other questions, feel free and chime and let me in. I'm glad that everyone's here taking advantage of this. So we're getting good information so we can get to the root cause. Just an hour ago, I did a podcast on mood, and low thyroid function can be a cause of mood issues. I see it very, very commonly. So if you're sitting there and you're watching this, maybe you're not on it live, maybe you're on it later, and you're like, hey, I have mood issues, depression, anxiety. Could that be from my thyroid? Yeah, it could be. It very well could be. George writes in, are you still in Austin? Yeah, I am in Austin. I go back and forth between a couple of places, but I am still in Austin. PTB writes, oh, you keep saying adrenals. Please explain. So your adrenals are their glands that sit in the top of your kidneys, mid-back, and they help produce cortisol, which is a glucocorticosteroid. Cortisol starts higher in the morning and then it gets lower throughout the day. It's part of your stress response, okay? And if cortisol is too high or too low, if it's flat line on the lower side, or if it's reversed where it's low then high, or if it just stays high, these perturbations, fluctuations in cortisol and your stress response can affect your thyroid. They can affect that T4 to T3 conversion. High levels of cortisol can cause that TSH to go up. And obviously, if we have low levels of cortisol and we have Hashimoto's and inflammation, well, we're not going to have our natural anti-inflammatory support to put out the fire. So the adrenals are intimately connected with thyroid conversion, inflammation reduction, and also with having healthy energy regarding our adrenals. Hope that makes sense. So that's why when we look at someone that has thyroid issues, we want to look at the adrenals together. I've seen so many people that think they have a thyroid issue. When we test their thyroid and hold it up against their adrenals, their TSH may be closer to 1, their T4 may be between 1 and 5, 1 and 1.5, their T3 may be 3.3, and their antibodies are stable, but their adrenals are flatlined. And then we're like, oh, this is an adrenal issue that's masking itself as a thyroid issue. And again, the press for the thyroid is probably a little bit more, meaning it's a little more prolific. People know about thyroid more than the adrenals, so they're myopically grabbing to that where it could be an adrenal issue. Okay, good. Yoli writes in, would a low white cell count be a result of a thyroid issue? It could. I mean, lower immune system, like a weakened immune system, the question is, what's the cause of that? Is there an infection? Is there a known autoimmune issue that's stressing the immune system out? But 3.6 is a bit low. I like at least above 4.5, but it's a little bit low. If there's some gut issues that we're addressing, Yoli, then we'd want to make sure we're getting the gut clean and we're infection free. Sylvia writes in, does Graves' disease cause eye bulging at times and not others? Well, Graves' disease is going to stimulate the thyroid to make more thyroid hormone, and the hormone causes hypertrophy to the rectus muscle in the eye. So it's like a guy giving themselves testosterone or growth hormone that causes hypertrophy of the muscle, like your bicep gets bigger when you work out. Well, thyroid hormone tends to affect the rectus muscles in the eyes, and when they hypertrophy, there's a bulging effect. It's kind of like if I was holding, a ball here and I squeezed it and I started squeezing, could slip out like a bar of soap. It could slip. So imagine your eye being squeezed by the muscles and it's that bar of soap popping out. So that's what's happening. Low Heat writes in, is iodine supplementation dangerous? If I'm not taking iodized salt and seafood, then iodine has to be supplemented, right? It depends on the amount. When you go to like ranges of 100x above the RDA, it could potentially drive autoimmunity. There's a lot of research on this, high levels of iodine driving autoimmunity. So if you're going to supplement iodine, keep it within the physiological range, 200 micrograms to 1 milligram, right? You got to be careful. There's a lot of doctors out there saying very high levels. Maybe, but there's a lot of data saying it could drive autoimmunity. So just if you're going to do it, I always wait till inflammation is down first. We always make sure till adequate levels of selenium are present, because the iodination process spits off hydrogen peroxide, which can be inflammatory. So we have to make sure adequate levels of selenium and zinc and magnesium are there in the background. And if we do it, we got to make sure the antibodies are more stable, and then we would gently nudge it up. So it really depends. Barbara writes, Dr. J, I have a friend of mine who just moved to my area, has lupus and a sudden onset of cold hands and cold feet. Could this be a symptom of thyroid challenge? It could be. If they have lupus, that's an autoimmune issue. Maybe they have ANA antibodies. There could be some thyroid antibodies present, and that could be attacking it. And this is good for everyone listening. Anyone that has one autoimmune condition, there's a 76% chance of a second autoimmune condition. So as soon as you have one autoimmune issue, whether it's MS or lupus or Sjogren's or scleroderma, there's a great chance that there could be another autoimmune condition in the background. So for sure, but you got to get the full workup. Naomi writes in, how do you check adrenals? No functional doctors where I live, only endocrinologists. So you'd want to do a cortisol rhythm test. One of the tests that I do is by Dutch. That's the dried urine testing for comprehensive hormones by Precision Analytics. So if you're living outside of the country, you can go to justinhealth.com/shop and you can go to recommended labs. And if you're a female, you can get the Dutch complete and do it on day 20 of your cycle. And that's helpful. Or if you're menopausal, any day, or if you're a man, you can get it as well. That's fine. But you want to schedule a new patient consult with me if you wanted to review it, or find a doc near you. But that's a great test to look at it. Most conventional docs will just do a serum cortisol in the morning, and that's it. It doesn't look at the free or the total or the rhythm that you get with cortisol. So it's missing a lot of information. So what test for adrenals? I like the Dutch adrenal. BioHealth has one called the 201 adrenal, which is great for saliva testing, which has its benefits too. That's great. Tammy writes in, so you go to justinhealth.com/shop and you click on the lab test section, and you can see some of the labs that I like. That helps. Tammy writes in, why did my antibodies go up after starting WP? Plus TSH went up too. Hard to say. That's typically paradoxical. But sometimes when the immune system is supported, sometimes you have an immune attack because of whatever else. Maybe there's an Epstein-Barr issue. Maybe there's an other infection. But I'd want more data points on that. And I'd want to know where all your levels are at. And again, we can't just myopically hit the thyroid by itself. We got to look at the gut too. How can I balance Dr. Brownstein's protocol of higher iodine intake for breast issues with concerns of harming my thyroid? So you would take levels that are a bit lower, more within physiological range, and then you would topically rub iodine on the breast tissue. That way, it's at least going into that area directly. The problem is when you just take iodine orally, lots of tissue wants it, and they can grab it. But if you throw it right into that tissue, your breast tissue has the first grab at it, so to speak. But I would bring the levels down to a physiological range. But make sure you're monitoring your antibodies and your thyroid, and also monitor your symptoms too. But worst case, you go down and then go into it more gentle and slower with a functional medicine doc watching. Sylvia writes in, thanks, Dr. J. Have a great love for what you're doing. Yeah, thank you so much, Sylvia. I really appreciate it. Kimberly writes in, Hashi's 24 years, was on Thyroid temporarily when we couldn't get Armour back 2 months ago, and having significant facial swelling and other edema. Working out, getting adequate protein, will this subside? So was on Thyroid. Yeah, so I want to understand. So are you saying that you were on Thyroid temporarily, but when you were on Armour, you were good? So the formula, I mean, typically Armour has a little bit of maltodextrin in it. So some people do better on Thyroid than Armour. It sounds like that you were on Thyroid when these issues happened. It sounds like that's what happened there. So if that is the case and you can't get Armour, you may want to look at MP thyroid. That's a little bit more similar to Armour. So I would look at going into NP and see how we do. Just make sure the dose is the same. Make sure you're matching the dose. Tammy writes in, how do I get an appointment with you? Go to justinhealth.com And then you can click on the Work with Dr. J tab or the schedule and just schedule a new patient consult with me. Hope that helps. Now, I see patients all over the world as well. And again, we do a lot of these live YouTube videos, and I have a lot of podcasts as well. So a lot of information. So when you guys see me, I'm in the trenches, I'm real, I'm here. I want to be accessible for everyone, even if you are not a patient. Kimberly writes in also periods lasting 2 weeks, iron issue, big time iron issue, big time estrogen dominance. The female hormones, Kimberly, are intimately connected to what's happening with your thyroid. Also, you need iron to make thyroid hormone. So if the iron is not addressed, it's going to be very difficult for you to balance your thyroid function. So make sure you're seeing someone to help support all of the issues together. You can't just be on one issue or you won't get it fixed. Kelly Nelson writes, and is fasting and IF okay when hypothyroid? I would say no. Get your thyroid stabilized first regarding your labs and how you feel, and then engage in intermittent fasting a few times a week. The key is you have to make sure you're still getting enough nutrition when you're doing intermittent fasting. It's really easy to cut the calories too low, and then you have a 25 or 33% deficit in your nutrition, and then those systems can't run optimally. Low Heat writes in, thanks, doctor. ACC to chronometer, my diet has over 150% RDA of selenium, which is great, magnesium, zinc. If iodine supplementation is done beyond its RDA, what antibodies are you saying might be an issue? TPO and thyroglobulin antibody may be the issue. Make sure you're also taking a good quality multi that has some of those nutrients in a chelated form, just to ensure that the metabolism and absorption is there. I was on NatureThyroid. So Kimberly, were you on NatureThyroid when you felt good and Armour when you felt worse? Or was it NatureThyroid when you felt worse and Armour when you felt better? So just make sure you delineate that. Low Heat writes in, are anti-caking agents and iodized salt really dangerous? Potentially. I mean, I only use Redmond's real salt. There's other Himalayan or Celtic sea salt brands. I like Redmond's because it is very soluble. It breaks down in water really nicely. So when I put a good teaspoon of it in my water in the morning, it breaks down. It's also got like 75 different minerals in there, and it just tastes really good too. George writes, and does sea salt increase cortisol or does it just regulate it? So when you have cortisol imbalances and your cortisol levels are stressed, it's an indication that your mineral corticoids are also probably stressed as well. So it's hard to hold on to minerals. So if you aren't able to hold on to minerals and you pee them out, well, these minerals are really important for your nerves to function. We need healthy levels of electrolytes so your nerves function. So it's going to support your nervous system, and it's going to support your blood pressure, and it's going to support your adrenals by it's like, imagine like you're really sore and you're trying to bring some books to your office, but you dropping books. It gives you that extra support so you can hold everything and bring it to where it needs to go. So your thyroid's overwhelmed or your adrenals are overwhelmed. They can't hold on to minerals. It's dropping the minerals like you would the books. So it gives you that little bit of extra support. Yuli writes in, thanks, Dr. J. I got my labs back already, so I'm looking forward to going over them with you at next appointment. Awesome, Yuli. Good to hear. But again, your immune system could be low it may take a while to come back up, but we'll use like immunoglobulins and things to boost them up as well, and we'll get the inflammation in your gut down. So make sure you bring these up with me when we chat real soon, Yuli. Thank you. Low Heat writes in, thanks, Doc. You're welcome, Low Heat. Tammy writes in, does MTHFR gene mutation affect thyroid function? It could. I mean, if you're someone with an MTHFR issue and you're consuming a lot of junky folic acid, or you're not getting enough natural folate, yeah, I mean, you may have a deficit in being able to methylate and activate various DNA and genes. It may impair detoxification, which you need methylation. It may impair neurotransmitters. So yeah, it may. Just make sure you're consuming a high quality supplement that has methylated B12 and or LMTHF folate or natural folate or calcium folinate. And that's a good start right there. And make sure you're consuming lots of good leafy green vegetables. If you can consume liver and egg yolks and choline, that's awesome as well. So potentially. Kimberly writes in, since starting Armour, I've developed more edema. Okay, that makes sense because Armour has some potential corn filler in there, but otherwise I'm feeling better switching to this. So yeah, so if Armour caused more edema, you're feeling better switching. So I would look at, so Armour edema, but you feel better. So I want to know how the thyroid levels correlate though, because just that alone is not enough information. But Armour does have, oh, excuse me, Armour does have some corn filler, so that's possible. Kelly writes in, thanks, Jay. I've been doing IF 7 days a week, usually 17 to 19 hours on during a 24-hour period. I probably not eat enough, but I don't have an appetite. I'll work on that. Yeah, that's what happens when you get more ketones in your body. Ketones are these fat metabolites that happen in lower carb and or fasting states, and they really suppress your appetite. So it's possible that intermittent fasting excessively has really lowered your appetite, and that's why you're not consuming enough. It's very possible. Tammy writes in, I use the Neurobiologic brand methylation complete. Good. It's probably got B6 in there. It's probably got B9, which is folate. It's probably got methylated B12, maybe some choline. So that's all really good. Excellent. All right. Any other live questions here for the thyroid? Let me know where you guys are at. I'm glad that we could connect here today. If anything else, let me know here before I sign off. I got another patient I have to jump on to here. But any other questions, let me know. Low Heat writes in, is sunflower lecithin good for thyroid? So lecithin is typically sunflower lecithin is used a lot in a lot of the liposomal products that are out there. So it's better than soy for sure. Is it going to help your thyroid by itself? I don't think so. I wouldn't say that. There could be some like phospholipids in there that are helpful, and maybe the phospholipids help the cell membranes. It's possible, but just make sure you're getting enough good quality fats and omega-3s, and that'll help too. These days, so much info on choline increasing TMAO, causing hormonal issues. Yeah, I'm not worried about TMAO. Just make sure choline's from good quality sources, right? Liver, egg yolks, healthy animal products. I think choline's really important for methylation. I'm not worried about the TMAO issue. A lot of vegan, vegetarian people stress about that, but I mean, just not worried about it. Naomi writes in, I have been plant-based, dairy-free for 3 years, just gone gluten-free for Hashis. Is there another supplement I should take? Well, number one, I find that people that go plant-based, they tend to miss a lot of good fat-soluble vitamins because a lot of the plant fats, they're not like A, D, E, or K. They tend to be beta-carotene that have to be converted to vitamin A. So if you have low thyroid, you may not be able to make that conversion. You may see orange deposits in your palms or your feet. So I think being plant-based, you miss some of the B12, you miss some of the vitamin A, you may get the precursors, beta-carotene, you may not convert it. So you got to be careful with that. And also you may get too much carbohydrate. A lot of plant-based people, if you're getting plant-based proteins, you tend to have 1/3 protein to 2/3 carbohydrate, which puts you at about 60 to 70% carbs, which could be too high for you. It could drive insulin resistance, and that could affect thyroid conversion too. So you have to look at that as well. Other supplements, it's too hard to say. I need to know what's going on specifically. But of course, a high quality multi-adequate selenium and making sure your thyroid's dialed up, but everything else would be more specific. Sylvia writes in, does hyperthyroid cause high blood pressure, edema, not taking any meds either? So hypothyroid can cause edema. I mean, part of how thyroid was assessed, it was called myxedema originally, myxedema, the edema part meaning swelling. But again, with hyperthyroid, you can also have high blood pressure because thyroid hormone is stimulating. But also if you have a Hashimoto attack, you may go in between hyper and hypo based on your autoimmune attack, stabbing your thyroid, hormone spilling out, stimulation increasing from the hormone and then dropping afterwards. So you could have this ebb and flow there as well. We'll keep choline intake up to mark. Good to hear, low heat. Good. Carol writes in, opinions on thermography used for detecting thyroid issues. I mean, it's going to be helpful to look at blood flow to the thyroid. The more inflammation there is, the more blood flow you'll see. You can also do an ultrasound to assess the thyroid too. And then your first line will be your simple TPO and thyroid globule and antibody-based testing outside of just your hormones. So it's good to look at everything to connect the dots because thyroid's really important, and low thyroid can have a major effect on your metabolism, burning fat, mood, energy, even bowel motility as well. Excellent. So clinically, I see lots of patients that have thyroid conversion issues, and that's not fixed most of the time by conventional medications like Synthroid or Levoxyl or levothyroxine. A lot of times it's not fixed. So people may be walking around with good levels of TSH or even adequate T4, but they may still have issues. So if you're listening to this video and you're like, hey, my doctor said I'm good, my TSH was perfect, keep that in mind. You want to recommend a full thyroid panel to look at everything. So if you haven't done that or your doctor won't order it, you can go to justinhealth.com/shop, click on the recommended lab test and look for that full thyroid panel on there. The Thyroid Advantage will be what I'd recommend. That'll give you everything. Okay, excellent. All right, any other questions here, y'all? I'm going to sign off in a minute here. Hope you guys are doing great and you're getting all your questions answered. Make sure you subscribe to this. If you're liking it, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell so you get notifications. I'm going to be going live later on this week. Lots of great guests, lots of great Chalk Talks and podcast episodes where we dive in. I'm going to finish the Chalk Talk here in a minute and we'll post it up later on today or tomorrow on gallbladder and fat digestion. So I'm excited for that. So keep an eye out for that. Low Heat writes in, thyroid health dependent upon gut health. I have ankylosing spondylitis and doing keto nutritional yeast will help or cause issue with gut health. Well, nutritional yeast is typically used to supplement B vitamins. So B vitamins are great. And then ankylosing spondylitis is an autoimmune condition that affects the spine. So of course there's gut issues. Ankylosing spondylitis has a connection with Klebsiella as well. So gut stuff, look all the way at the gut. Paul writes in, is Quest or LabCorp better? Both are great. Quest and Lab, typically Quest is number one, LabCorp is number two in regards to the biggest labs. I use Quest because the company that I like, Ulta Labs, uses Quest, and they are really user-friendly. They release my patients' lab results to them right away. So if you need a lab from me regarding your blood test, if you get it from me, we'll release the lab results to you right away. If you have an imbalance, we definitely want to chat, though, for sure. And they also track your results. So when you look at like 1 month to the next, you can see them all lined up in a row. So it's really easy to compare, by looking at the previous results where, when I used to use LabCorp, I used to all be on different pages. So you're flipping through and it's really tough. Thanks, Sylvia. Appreciate it. Kimberly, you are totally welcome. I'm glad everyone's enjoying the live chat. Make sure you subscribe, everyone. Again, if you need to reach out to me, head over to justinhealth.com. Click on the schedule button if you want to dive in deeper. I appreciate it. I'll be back for more. So stay tuned. You guys have a phenomenal day. Take care. Bye.